Hey, I'm late again. Always going to be late, apparently. Um, Wait a couple minutes, see if people show up or if they gave up on me. Uh, so we're going to do our main mix. We're doing the same bread we've been making for the last 3 times. So we'll stick with the same thing. We're gonna. I just put up the new schedule on the Google Doc. So if you guys want to check that out, we're gonna do a little seed grain soaker. Thanks, Joe. We're gonna do a little seed grain soaker, our next spread. So we'll show you some of that, and then the one after that we'll do a higher whole grain, whatever whole grain you got. We're waiting on that just for everybody to get flour. For a lot of you who ordered, so I've been waiting a little bit. So if you want to get some seed, something to mix into the next one, we'll do a little soaker. I think that's on the 18th in a couple days. So check that schedule. So we'll start branching out a little bit, throwing some things in there, mess with hydration, mess with what kind of flours. Obviously, we're a little limited because ingredients are really hard to come by. So we'll just keep making bread and keep practicing. But today it's the same as we've been making. So let me write that down in the comments. And as I write it, I will also say it because I'm not sure if you can see the comments if you're watching this video afterwards. So we got, first thing we'll start with is our water. And, oh, wait, now I'm going to forget. 315, if I'm not mistaken. And then we got our starter, 150. And then, oh man, I am going to forget. What did I do with this? Anyone remember who's out there? Hold on. Aha. All right, I found it. All right, so it was very disorganized. 455 of flour in about a half an hour after we mix. Salt's going to be about 11 grams. All right, so there's that. My measurements are going to be a little bit bigger because I'm making 4 loaves of bread. So you can just scale it up. Thank you, AW. So there's our measurements. Let's just get right at it. We'll mix, and then we'll talk about some stuff or answer some questions. So get your questions if you got anything you want answered, or if you want to, whatever you've run into at this point. But let's mix first, just because we're kind of on a time frame. I realized it's tighter to get it done if I'm talking and then mixing. The hair is kind of crazy. This is my bread, so I'm going to touch my face and then mix the bread. I wouldn't do that if I was making your bread. So sorry. Just got out of the water. All right. So let's get our water. 315. Making, so let's see. I got 1260 because I'm doing 4 times that. All right. And then our starter, nice and bubbly and alive. So one way you can check when your starter is if it floats. That's usually a pretty good idea. So you got 150 of this. I've got 600 of it. I want to get it out of the container, so I'm going to get my hand just a little bit wet. I'm going to move the camera so you can see more what's going on here. So nice and floaty, if you can see that. It's hanging out in the top. So yeah, that stuff's ready. You could also see that it hadn't fallen and collapsed. So leave that container. I've got 2 containers because I wanted to use one of the clear ones so you could kind of see it. And you notice my starter containers are straight-sided. A lot easier to see how much stuff is grown if you got a straight-sided container. We've been talking about this a little bit here and there. And then you can stir that up a little bit. Okay, and then flour, we got 455. We're gonna do we've been doing about a third whole grain if you have it. Otherwise, you can do all white flour. Doesn't matter that much, except your personal taste. It is gonna affect how much water you want to use. So you'll have a more slack dough if you're, so something that will show the water more. And if you use more white flour, the more whole grain you have, the more water it will suck up. So you want to use a little bit more water. And that's part of what you'll experiment as you get in. But I'm doing these measurements and about a third whole grain. and it works pretty well. Sometimes I'll add a little bit more water if I feel like it. So 455, so about 150 grams of whole grain, give or take. Doesn't have to be perfect. And then continue up to the 455. For me, I've got 1,820 of flour, so I'm going to use about 700 or so. I've got this mix of spelt and kamut that I've been using. And so I'm going to just kind of toss that up so it's roughly one of each. All right, and then about 700-ish. There we go. And then you're going to continue to 455. I'm continuing 4 times that to 1,820. Perfect. With my all-purpose flour or bread flour if you have it. I've been getting a lot of questions about that. Bread flour, all-purpose. We've talked about it a little bit, but of course there's a lot of videos. I've been getting a little bit more of it. All it is a protein count generally. Use different types of wheat, hard winter, spring. There's different types of wheat that have different properties. And of course, different strains. There's a lot of that. Let's mix this while I talk. So same thing, use your hand as a paddle. Don't squeeze yet. Get all of this hydrated before you begin squeezing. So all-purpose usually sits around 11 to 12% protein, depending on the brand and the time of year and the wheat grown and all that. Bread flour, as we name it, usually sits around 12 to 14%. You can use either to make this type of bread. You could use bread flour if you wanted. It's not necessary. If you're doing something like bagels, something that needed a little more chew, you would want to try to find something with a higher protein count. Be cautious though, because sometimes a lot of the cheaper brands you see at stores, it'll say bread flour, but it won't. It'll actually be more of a protein count of an all-purpose. So sometimes they just say that and it doesn't even mean anything. So there's no real hard and fast true rule. No one's saying it has to be this or that. All right, so everything's hydrated. So now I'm going through and squeezing, breaking up, making sure everything's no lumps, no anything. And now we'll get to some questions if you got any. AW, what are your thoughts on a 2-hour or so autolyse of flour and water only? You could do that. Your hardest issue there is going to be that if you're using a sourdough starter, there's so much water in the sourdough starter that if you mix only the flour and the water and you leave out your starter culture, it's going to be very, very stiff. And then you're going to have to mix in a starter culture that is generally fairly wet. Now you can get around that one way by mixing up a starter culture that is stiffer, that has a hydration closer to what your bread's going to be, because it is going to be hard after a couple hours to mix in a 100% hydration starter with a 75% hydration dough. That's kind of difficult to do. Not impossible, especially if you're only doing a loaf or two, or if you have a big, strong mixer. But what's that going to do? Honestly, it's probably not going to do that much if you're making sourdough, because this hydrates for so long anyways. That little bit of beginning of time helps, but the bread ferments for 5-6 hours, plus then in the baskets again. I don't know if you're going to notice that much of a difference, but try it. I absolutely recommend trying everything. If you have a question about it, as soon as you get the hang of how this works and you figure out the shaping and you can very consistently make the same bread, then start experimenting with stuff, because everything makes a little bit of a difference and it might matter to you. So try stuff out. Let me know how it goes. But one thing I'd say is don't go crazy until you can shape well, until you can tell when the dough is properly proofed, until you have a base set of skills, because otherwise you're going to get different results, but you're never going to know whether it's you or if it's what you change. So that's why we're starting out with the same bread and kind of going through the same process. Get good at something, and then once you know you have all of the proper skills, then you can start experimenting, and your experiments will actually mean something, because I find a lot, like people's first loaf of bread is amazing, and then their second and third ones are trash. and that's pretty common. So you get a little bit of beginner's luck, and then yeah. So we're good. We're mixed. I mean, you can mix as long as you want. Any other questions before I go? Whole grain, yeah, it's 50-50 kamut and spelt. Nothing real special about that other than the fact that I like the way that they taste. The Khorasan, the kamut, I find it tends to be a little soft, so I don't like to use it by itself. It's weird to talk into my apron. So if you're getting, we ordered some kamut for people. If you're getting some of that, I don't personally like bread that's made with a ton of it. I do like the flavor of it, and I like the way it mixes up and feels, but it's a little bit soft. We'll have to look into what the protein mix is in that and why it does that. But I find it makes bread that's a little bit dense. It's not my favorite, but I do like the flavor of it. So I find with the spelt works pretty well. I don't personally use a lot of whole wheat. Just, I don't know. It's just personal preference. There's nothing above that. Like the flavor of it, I guess I've just eaten it my whole life. So I like some other flavors occasionally. And so when I buy crappy bread when I'm on the road, I will buy whole wheat. So I still have it all the time. So just personal preference. All of them react differently like that. And you'll find little things like that. I really, really like spelt, but it's also like twice as expensive as everything else. So use it at your own cost. Yeah, percent starter, give that a shot. A thicker starter, you could even go thicker. Honestly, the lower your hydration is, you're going to move into some of those acetic acids. And if you got a good palate, you'll probably start tasting it right away. I don't personally, but yeah, you can do that to bump up tanginess. Another thing you can do is just ferment longer, but you have to ferment at a lower temperature because, of course, you know, as you ferment, you're going to build in gases, and if you stretch out your protein starch matrix too much, you're going to overproof, which is stretching it to the point of breaking, especially because as it goes into the oven, it's going to go even after you're done proofing and you're done shaping. So bumping up tanginess is an interesting thing to do. You can use a larger amount of starter as well, because that's going to ferment for longer. And then you're going to bring in fresh flour and build up a whole bunch of new proteins that haven't been stretched out. So lots of ways to skin that cat. So try them all and let me know. But again, make sure that you're comfortable proofing, that you're comfortable shaping, that you know that you can get the same process every time, because otherwise you're just kind of shooting in the dark. So any other questions? We'll come back and mix our salt and a little bit of water in and begin proofing. Nice, yeah, 56 degrees is pretty good. Anyways, side note. I don't know if you can, if someone can tell me when you rewatch the videos, can you see the comments on the side? Because otherwise I need to clarify more what the questions are. So get back to me. All right, see you in half an hour, 20 minutes probably at this point. We'll mix in some salt and continue making some bread.